alas, heave-ho, it's a long, long way to go. It's a long, long pull with our hatches full.
I joined the Merchant Marine when I was 18 and a half. I decided to become a Merchant Mariner because my three older brothers were veterans. They were in World War II. They were older brothers, and all of them were in the infantry in different parts of the world. I went straight for the Merchant Marine for another reason. The Merchant Marine base, the U.S. Maritime Base, was based in Sheepshead Bay, Brooklyn. I was a Brooklynite, and I lived about 10 minutes from the base, and I figured, since my parents were very upset about my three older brothers being overseas, that at least if I got leave, I'd be able to come home and see them. The choice I made was great, because not only did I know when I went to the base as an apprentice seaman that they were going to give tests for officer candidate school. And I passed the test, and I was sent to officer candidate school as a 90-day wonder. And there I became a purser pharmacist in 3 months, and I was a warrant officer. But when I went to officer candidate school, part of the training was that they would send me to a U.S. hospital to train with doctors and nurses how to give injections. And they also, during the course, we had first aid course every day and treatments of different situations. It was 1945 that I took a shipment from New York to Italy. It was on an oil tanker. When we took oil, we went to Venezuela, and then we took the oil to Italy. Well, I was a purser pharmacist mate aboard the ship, and that meant that I would be in charge of administrative duties such as taking care of the crew. And aboard the ship, we usually had a 60-man crew. And anybody that was sick had to report to sick bay, because I was the only one that was authorized to examine any crew member, including the officers, that was sick, and prescribe a treatment. Also, I was in charge of what they call a slop chest, where the men were able to come once a week to buy cigarettes, candy, etc. And I had to keep records of what they bought, because I had to make the payroll out for the whole trip. And I had to deduct any advances they took on their pay. We didn't sail in convoys because we had Navy gunners aboard the ship. But the only thing we worried about is, of course, mines. We were always worried about mines. The biggest thing we worried about in every port, even when the war ended, was when you went into port, they mined all the ports. We were always worried that something was set off and the ship would be blown up. Well, the scenarios in the North Atlantic were really a lot of times were bad, rough water. Sometimes the waves would be above the mast, 35-foot waves. I've never seen anything like it. And on one trip, we had such large waves, storm, that the radio operator was told to radio the shore. We were close to the shores of France. He slipped from the top deck and fell to the deck below. And they called me, and I had to pick him up. They picked me up, brought him into the area where I took care of him, and I splintered his leg. He had broken his leg. And it looked like we were sending out an SOS, because the ship split in two. The seams on this Liberty ship had seams that Kaiser made, and it split. The water was coming into the hold. So the captain thought we were going to abandon ships. We got the abandoned ship notice, and we put on life jackets. Then the storm subsided, so he called off the SOS, but the radio operator had fallen already and broken his leg, and it turned sunny, so we radioed ashore, and they came out in the little transporters, you know, these PS, whatever they call them, these PT little boats, and they took us ashore, and we put the ship in dry dock. So we lived in France for 2 months while they repaired the damage to the ship. I did transport German POWs back from where they were imprisoned in the United States and took them back to Germany, to Bremerhaven. Well, it felt a little strange, but I felt they were none of their fault. I mean, even though my whole heritage is Jewish, I didn't feel any hatred toward them because they didn't create it. Adolf Hitler created it. I was very nice to them. In fact, one of the German prisoners gave me a pair of his aviator glasses. And then, on the way back, I took American troops back. And that was a great feeling. Take troops back from Europe on that trip, take prisoners over and take troops back, and that was great. Those guys were all happy and everything. They were whooping it up and on the ship, and you know, they were having a great time. I took 6 voyages. Between 1944 and 1946, I took 6 voyages. Yeah, I always sailed from New York because I lived in Brooklyn, so I always wanted to come back to New York. And the biggest exciting thing for me and for the crew is that when we were heading back to New York, the crew would always bet on ETAs. When would the ship hit New York port? They would bet little bets, you know, of when it was going to arrive. But to me, I didn't care about the betting part. I couldn't wait to see the Statue of Liberty. Once I saw the Statue of Liberty anchored there, they anchored the Statue of Liberty because they wouldn't let the men ashore until the health officials came aboard. Now, the health officials came aboard to see me and the captain because I had to prepare the manifest. That was part of the duties of a purser. And the captain would have to approve it. So the 2 of us would be the only ones to see the health official. So whenever I saw the statue and saw the health official come, I knew it was back home. And that's why I love the Statue of Liberty. 6 times that happened to me. It was such an inspiration that years later, this is 1946, I think it was 1965 or so, that I got a letter from the Statue of Liberty Foundation. So I get this letter saying, we're looking for donations to beautify Ellis Island. Now, my parents came from Poland or Austria, both of them. So I felt to honor them, I would give donations to the Statue of Liberty Foundation. So I bought a plaque for every one of my brothers, every one of their wives, and every one of their children. And I put the plaques up at the Ellis Island Foundation. I left the Merchant Marine in October 1946 when VJ Day was announced. I was in Mobile, Alabama, coming back a trip from Europe with some merchandise or cargo. And when we hit the port in Mobile, they announced that VJ was there and that you could leave the Merchant Marine immediately if you wanted to. And I said, I want to go back to college. I think the most important thing I got out of the Merchant Marine was the experience of being an officer aboard a ship with 60-man crew, being responsible for everybody as far as their health, their welfare, and taking care of them. It gave me a sense of being very in control of my life, that I could do anything I wanted to do. It gave me a focus and a motivation that I was at the age of 19, where I was an officer, with men that were 35 and 40, that when I came ashore, I just felt confident I could do anything I wanted to do. I think the Merchant Marine was probably one of the most important services that the United States had, because without them, they could not transport all the essentials to the war zones. And of course, I'm not belittling the infantry, the Air Force, the Navy, but this was tremendous what they could do. And I still feel the Merchant Marine is one of the strongest organizations the United States of America has, in peacetime even. I'm just proud that I was a Merchant Mariner and I was part of it.
Let the sea roll high or low. We can cross any ocean, sail any river. Give us the good and we'll submarine. We're the men of the